We are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Double O One Radio Weekly, episode 12. We've made it 12 whole weeks, boys.
That
12 whole
is like
weeks.
that's like a year if instead of weeks it was a month.
Yep.
So multiply that by 4, a whole year.
Yep. All right. So, I'm Ryan. I'm your host. I'm joined by Wyatt,
That is me. That's my name.
Ben,
That's the one who made that banger of a joke.
and Alex.
Hi.
All right, we got a packed show today. We're talking about reviews in the games industry, and I'm sure everyone is
Wow.
so excited to get into this
So
massive
opinionated.
pile of controversy.
I feel like we're kind of poking the hornet's nest a little bit.
A little bit,
We're,
although
we're so timely.
point to make on that, we are not going to be talking about The Last of Us 2.
At all.
We might like offhandedly mention it, but we're not going to go into the controversies around it because we are planning an episode about that specifically.
I literally
also-
just stopped playing
in, like,
it
2
just
weeks.
before starting the podcast.
Because
like,
I haven't played the game
minutes.
yet.
Yeah,
so-
and we want to play the
Minutes.
game and have our opinions be very fully formed by
yeah.
the time we do that. So we're not going to talk about that game today. We're going to kind of just pretend those reviews are not a huge controversy right now for the sake of making the episode where we go fully into that controversy specifically better.
And to be clear, in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty small controversy. But if you're
Yeah.
just kind of limiting it to gaming and like game industry, that's the big thing.
Look, there's a lot of controversies right now, but we're all still like stuck
Let's
in our
just-
rooms. Might as well get mad at some video games, you know?
Well, we still can.
Fight the real enemy.
While we still have the chance, might as well. All right. So we start every show off with a news game. And you know, I thought this week we'd mix it up a little bit. And we're doing I guess you could call this a news game. It's not about news though. It's tied into, you guessed it, review scores.
Whoa.
We're
Didn't see
going
that
to do a
one coming.
platform showdown, okay? We're going all the modern consoles and PC. We're going to go and look at 2 highly rated titles for those consoles, and then I want you to tell me which one got the higher Metacritic score or OpenCritic score. We're using OpenCritic for this. And if you can, take a stab at what the score is. I'll give you a hint that these are all scoring very highly because this is like a a battle
best.
between the consoles, you know.
Right.
Oh boy, console
All right.
war. Here we go.
Yeah, console war. Also, important note, I did also try to avoid picking games of the same genre. So some of them, the review scores will be very close. Some of them, they'll be pretty far apart just because, like, depending on the console, you don't have a lot of games of certain types. Like, the Xbox One doesn't really have many exclusives that are, like, RPGs. So
Right.
we don't have any of that. Okay. Speaking of the Xbox One, we're going to start with them. So, our Xbox One contestants are Forza Horizon 4 and the Halo Master Chief Collection.
Okay.
Which one has a higher aggregate OpenCritic score?
Halo. Fucking all over the place every day.
I would say Halo. I would say Halo, with the exception that the Master Chief Collection launched in such a horrible state that may have affected its reviews quite a bit, even today. Because it's good today. It's very good today. But it came out horrifically. And so that might actually make it lower. So I'm going to go with
thinking-
Forza, actually.
I'm thinking the hype train.
The Halo
Kept her
hype
up.
train.
Yeah, the
Halo.
hype train.
All right. Wyatt
Buried 'em.
is the winner in this scenario. Forza Horizons 4. Can you take a guess at what its OpenCritic score is?
It's like a
Um,
98.
do I need an exact number, or can I do a range?
I mean, just guess. Like, it's out of 100. Just take a stab.
Okay.
You're not being scored or anything. just take it.
93.
You're very close. It's a 92.
Dude,
Yeah.
I'm so good at this. I'm so good at
That
this.
is, I think, the highest rated Xbox One / Microsoft Store exclusive there is.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, the other thing with Microsoft is like a lot of their stuff releases on PC, especially even Halo MCC is on PC now. So that part is like kind of including them, the PC side of things, in this for their exclusivity purposes. Microsoft owns both platforms, so like, oh well.
Right.
Halo MCC, what do you think that got?
85.
You are on the money, Wyatt.
I was gonna say 86.
85.
Feeling an 86.
What the hell?
All right. So we just talked about PS4, or we just talked about Xbox One. We're gonna talk about the PS4. We got two very highly rated titles here. The PS4 has a lot more exclusive competition in the high rankings, including the Last of Us games. But for the sake of avoiding controversy, neither of them are up here. So we have. I also had to choose games that had different scores, which means there are some games that I had to skip over because like a bunch of these games had the same aggregate score, so I had to make something that had at least like a difference. So we have Persona 5, our first high-scoring PS4 game, versus God of War.
Which
This is
God of
the
War?
new God of War for the PS4.
Okay.
God of War.
God of War. I'm
Dad
gonna
of
say.
boy.
Dad of boy. Yes.
Dad of boy. No. Yeah, I think. Oh no, man.
And I
It's
also
tough.
did make
It's
sure
tough.
these games all had a good number of reviews, so that it
Oh.
wasn't just like one reviewer giving it a high score.
Yeah, I think Persona 5 is a better game, so it won.
It won. Okay.
Sound logic.
How about
I have-
you two?
I have both of those games, and I've yet to play either of them.
Oh, sick.
Oh,
That's a
Alex.
shame.
They're both incredible.
Alex.
You can't go wrong
Alex.
with either.
God of War is like top 3 of like this entire generation.
All right,
For
which
me.
game is better for you?
All right, all right, all right.
God of War.
God of War.
God of War, yeah.
God of War, with a 95, is that game's Open Critic score. Persona 5 is trailing a single point behind at 94.
Damn it!
Oh,
I didn't take the weed factor.
And
into
Persona
account.
5 Royal
I
has
should've
the
known.
same score as well. They're scored the same. Okay.
I should have known. I should have known that the normie factor. It's just a slight multiplication mishap that I made there in my mind.
Yeah,
you
just a
didn't
slight
carry the
calculation.
you didn't
mishap.
carry the 5.
I didn't carry the normie. Fucking-
All right.
Pink letter represents the normie.
So next we
Seriously.
have the Switch Showdown.
Ooh.
We've got The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild versus Super Mario Odyssey.
Oh, that's
Breath
tough.
of the Wild.
I think Breath of the
I'll
Wild.
also
gonna have to
say
go with
these are the by far the two highest reviewed games on this list.
That sounds about right.
By far, we just had a 95.
Well, I mean, look, it's a big difference. We're basically cutting off the scale below like 85. So
It's a game of inches at that point.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say Breath of the Wild.
all right, I think you're all wrong. It's a
Oh!
Super Mario Odyssey has a
No
97.
way.
Whatever.
That
Breath of the Wild
surprises
has a
me.
96.
That
Surprised me because I
surprises-
was bored with that game.
I think it's
just
a-
not my jam, but
My guess is that Odyssey has a broader appeal, where
That's yeah.
See, I think
it's
it's
like
the
a
other
great
way.
game to play with your kids and stuff. Whereas Breath of the Wild is a fantastic game, but like if you're super into Zelda stories, the story is not the best. Probably dock a point for that.
I would
So-
also say that it is not nearly as good as second playthrough. Like half of that game is just the mystery of learning everything about that world and how everything works. And once you figured it out, a second playthrough isn't nearly as much fun.
Yeah, it's the second playthrough is great if you enjoy the gameplay, but the gameplay doesn't really change.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff. So now we've got our PC stuff, our PC showdown. The way we chose PC games is basically, are they on PC and did they originally release on PC? That doesn't mean
enough.
they're not on other consoles. Yeah. So we have Disco Elysium versus Sid Meier's Civilization 6.
Ooh.
I'm
Okay.
just purely based on the fact that I don't know what Disco Elysium is. It's Civ. It's Civ 6.
It's like a CRPG, right? Disco Elysium.
Disco
something like
Elysium is a narrative RPG.
that? Okay.
Oh no, it's an indie game. It might have a 10.5. Sorry, shit.
I'll give you-
I
I'll give you one piece of information, Ben. Disco Elysium won a lot of Game of the Year awards. So did Civ 6.
know.
This is tough.
Yeah, Disco Elysium is not as low profile as it might sound.
No, I don't think it is. But I still think Civ 6 is.
All right.
I know it's Civ 6 because it has the previous installments coming before it, so I think people are gonna be building off of.
I'll go with Disco Elysium. Screw it.
Yeah, Wyatt is right. It's Disco Elysium.
Ah!
I should have known. It's
Yeah,
an indie
Disco
darling.
Elysium has
Shit.
a 92, and Sid Meier's Civilization 6 has a 89.
Really?
Yep.
I feel like Civ. Well, I don't know. I haven't played 6.
I think a lot of people thought either 4 or 5 was better to them personally, so they scored it well, but not as high as it could have been.
It's Because Civ 5 had like a crap load of DLC, didn't it? And,
A
like,
crap load
going-
of what?
Oh,
DLC.
they
Yeah,
always
Ben,
do.
Mike.
DLC.
Yeah, they both have a lot of DLC. I think Civ 6 is better
Well,
base
think,
game compared to Civ 5 base game, but
yeah, and I
yeah, there's
think a lot of
DLC.
people's problems with Civ 6 when it came out was like, why would I play Civ 6 when my Civ 5 game is just like a lot more right now?
yeah, it's like the Sims controversies, you know.
Yeah. It's not
Alright.
really
Whenever-
controversy. It's just the fact of starting a new game.
Yeah,
it's
because
whenever you-
do you
yeah.
expect the new game to be as good as the old game plus the old game's DLCs, or just as good as the old game was when it launched?
Right.
Yeah, that's our game. You guys got through it. I think Wyatt was the winner.
I think I got all of them wrong.
Definitely.
Yeah, Wyatt definitely got the most right. The games
I know,
industry
I know
knowledge
what the
coming through.
people, I know what the people like.
The people, they hear you. All right. So now we're moving on to our primary topic, reviews in the games industry. This is going to get controversial real fast, I think. So we're going to open up with the first, I think, question a lot of people will have is, how much do reviews matter to you, or how much do they impact your purchasing decisions?
Okay, I'll start. So I don't know if you guys know this about me, and I'm talking to the people, obviously. Okay, whatever, move on. I love watching reviews as entertainment. Partially, I think more so than whether it'll influence my purchasing decision or not. I really love like what goes into a really well-made review, and I love looking at the different personalities and stuff like that. And so I think I follow people a lot of the time just to hear people talk about games more than actual like whether influences my purchasing decision or not. But I think in most situations, I think they are important when you look at them in context.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I watch a lot of reviews just to watch them, especially for older games. I love watching reviews of like weird, obscure games.
Mm-hmm.
I think reviews, when they impact my purchasing decision, it's for games that I either didn't care that much about to begin with and just had like a passing interest in, or for stuff that I never would have played in the first place. It's getting really good reviews, which for me was the case in Disco Elysium. Of like that game got fantastic reviews, and I didn't know about it, and that got me to look it up.
Yeah, and usually it's like, all right, I want to buy this game. I'll go to like my default reviewers. So I'll go to like, does SkillUp have a review? Does ACG have a review? Does Angry Joe have a review? That kind of thing.
I also, while we're getting into this conversation, I want to direct people to Alana Pierce. She just put out a pretty fantastic video about review scores and how they're kind of handled. She used to be a reviewer for IGN. So that's a great video to watch if you want some insight into the reviewing process and how a lot of the people that review think. I just want to mention that while we're here. But
and on that note, Donkey has a great 2-part series talking about game criticism as well.
yeah, Dunkies is a little more satirical though.
It's more satirical, but I think it has a lot of good points in there.
Yeah,
So.
it does. So Ben and Alex, do reviews impact your purchase decisions?
No, basically. I mean, reviews for me, I like to watch ones that have a lot of, like, the opinion of the reviewer basically doesn't matter to me. I'm not most of the time, but if I watch a game review and it has like some interesting gameplay, and I'm like, oh, that game looks kind of interesting, then maybe I'll pick it up and refund it if it's bad. But like, I don't know. I don't. If I watch a Jim Sterling video and he says this game sucks, I'm not gonna like, oh, that game sucks, I'm not gonna buy it. Like, if
Yeah.
I think it's interesting in the gameplay, I tend to like watch gameplay more than look at number reviews. Like the number reviews on IG, like I don't read reviews ever because I think it's mostly useless.
Yeah, I think. All right, I'm gonna get back to the numbered part of the review later.
Yeah, we
yeah,
have
well, that's
the
a different
number
section,
section's a
but-
separate section we'll get into.
My point with that is that like, their reviewer's overall opinion is irrelevant. If I see gameplay that looks really interesting in their review, then I'll go for it and maybe try it out. But
How about you, Alex?
I feel kind of the same way. I feel like I'm way too easily influenced by reviews, whether or not they're good or bad. Just there's too many of them coming out. It just overwhelms me, and I'm very indecisive to begin with. So I try for starters, I try not to look at a lot of reviews.
Yeah, and I think a
Like-
good point on that is you can find reviews that are like extremely positive and extremely negative for pretty much every game.
But
that's
I
because-
also, when I do try to look at reviews, it's usually I try to find sites and stuff that don't use a number or a scale system at all. It's just paragraphs that I can read through.
Yeah, and we'll get back to
Uh,
that point too.
reviews to me can be really good to like give you a little taste of what's going on, and then like if a reviewer says like, well, there's this one huge problem with this game on Nvidia graphics cards, it just doesn't fucking work, then I'll be like, okay, well, I'm not buying that, like something
Yeah.
like that, or like, oh, the fucking there is no VSync, or like VSync just is always on and you can't unlock your frame rate from 34 FPS and a half, and I'm gonna be like,
Yeah.
okay, probably gonna wait until I fix that to buy the game.
I think a
something
lot of
like that.
cases that's not necessarily the review making you change your opinion. It's the game had a problem that would
Right,
have
but
made
I
you not
wouldn't-
buy it anyway.
I wouldn't have known about it unless I had watched that person's
Yeah.
video or review or
I think like Anthem is a good example of that, of a
Yeah.
game that the pre-release material looked pretty good, and then reviews just kind of revealed a lot of issues. Although
Yeah.
Anthem also did like a pre-release event that was not great, but
I played the beta and I was like, oof, that was
yeah,
not fun.
you and I were not impressed when we played.
Oh my god! I was like, this is a beautiful looking slideshow. Where's the game?
Yeah, Anthem is an entirely another topic for a different.
It ran all right. It was just
Oh, it didn't. I played it on
Just-
Xbox.
unbelievably
why.
dull. Oh, we played it on PC. That's why.
Yeah. All right. So we've opened the floodgates a bit. We've talked a little bit about how reviews are important. I do want to say there are a lot of studies on whether or not reviews impact purchasing decisions. The issue is most of them kind of conflict with each other, and there's a lot of stuff that says they don't. There's a lot of stuff that says they do. The metrics are very different for a lot of them. Some of them are using like, would people recommend it to their friend, which I don't know how reliable that is as information, but I think generally it shows reviews have a bit of an impact, but not nearly as much as I think people believe they do. And I also want to direct again, Alana Pierce has a podcast as well where she talks with a few industry professionals and voice actors, and they've talked about that there before. And a lot of the time for indies, reviews aren't a big deal, but for AAAs, they're more of a deal.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
And-
with that, I want to ask, what is the worth of review scores to you guys? Do you think there should be review scores? Should they be unscored? Do scores matter personally to you?
The biggest problem with a score to me is I feel like there are so many people that will just skip the entire review and look at the score and then just base their entire opinion or decision off of just that score at the end.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's so destructive because it doesn't take into consideration everything else, literally everything else that the reviewer has to say about something. And I don't really blame that on whoever's putting the score there. It's just that's how it is, and that is a shame.
Definitely.
Numbers should be outlawed, and people need a longer attention span.
Hot
I
take.
think they're all right as like what they should be used as is like a cursory, little get your feet wet before you read the rest of the article kind of deal. Like, oh, this is what I'm in for.
Yeah.
you know?
I think it's a good
But-
way if a game is like extremely bad or way better than people thought it would be. It's a
Yeah.
good way to be like at a glance,
catches
is this
your
something worth
attention.
paying attention to?
Especially if you're like scrolling through an IGN like list or whatever, on the website, and you see this
Yeah.
game that you never heard of, and you're like, ooh, that has a 95. Like maybe I should check that out.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
a way to catch your eye. I don't know. But
Yeah,
people definitely use it as like an end all way more than they should.
Yeah, and it's not an inherently bad thing. Like summarizing an entire review in a scale is not a bad idea at all. It's how it's interpreted by a lot of other people. And I'm not saying everyone does that, but I feel like that's the common thing for a lot of people is just, okay, look at the score, then that's it. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are definitely people that do that. I think like my personal opinion is that scores have some worth in that they give you an idea of if a game is like baseline good or not. But besides that, you really do need to read or watch reviews to get those opinions and form your own opinion. Because like if you don't like action RPGs, despite Path of Exile getting like 9s, you're probably not going to like it.
However, I feel like with scores and with everything with everything in terms of reviews, I think like the best point, the reason I recommended that Donkey video is that, or those two videos, is that the most important thing is context.
Yeah.
it's if you have one reviewer, they're going to have natural bias towards one genre or one series or another, right? And so if you look at someone who isn't, I'm going to use the same example that he did because it's such a good example. He hates anime, he hates turn-based RPGs, he can't stand either of them. So when he tells you that Persona 5 is a really great game, that should say something. And that opinion is really important for people who aren't typically into those types of games. And if someone's like, okay, I don't typically like that genre, but I'm saying it's really good, then that is really useful for people that are outside of that like bubble, you know?
And yeah, it's like people should not be surprised when Donkey doesn't like Death Stranding.
I was not surprised at all.
Yeah, and I think there is like some legit arguments to be made there that Donkey's video is a little misleading, but I don't think anyone goes in expecting Donkey to think Death Stranding is the greatest game of all time.
Yeah, I was shocked that he actually didn't hate. What was that? What was that one? It was a Japanese RPG that came out, and I was like, Dragon Quest. He didn't completely hate it in that shot.
Dragon Quest, yeah. Dragon Quest is super Japanese. I've played the game. It's great, but yeah, it is very much a JRPG. And if you don't like JRPGs, you will not like the game.
Yeah, and that's why I have such a wide range of like specific critics that I go to, is because they all cover a wide field of different things.
Yeah, it's like critics will have their genre preferences, and you should kind of definitely look at their opinions and see if their like opinions line up with yours, because then you'll have a better idea if you'll like games that they like.
Yeah, that context is so important in terms of who that reviewer is. You know.
Okay, we're about to get the spicy question. This is the one of the big boys. Should games be reviewed as art or as products?
Well, I think that depends on how much you're paying for the game. Because actually, you know what? I think there needs to be a little bit of both.
Yeah, middle ground.
I think there has to be a middle ground.
I think generally it's like a slider, you know.
Yeah.
Either
Generally, there's
both,
some middle ground.
or
but-
the people making the game should specify.
Yeah, so this is the one point where I think we're gonna actually bringing up The Last of Us is a little warranted. In this scenario, I want to talk about the first game, not the second game. in that the first game scored very highly, but the gameplay is not amazing. The gameplay itself is just pretty standard third-person shooter. I think the reason it scores so high is that the emotional highs of that game, the emotional highs and lows, are so affecting that they kind of color your thoughts on it. So it feels like you're more likely to give something a high review if it makes you feel a lot of like emotion. Yeah.
Well, I think that's just a testament to how effective the narrative was.
Yeah. And the
I
other
disagree with that entirely.
the other.
Well,
thing,
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I don't mean.
I'm not saying like I don't think your opinion was colored. I think that's just your opinion.
I think
The
it's that
game
like a
was
lot of
so
reviewers will focus on like a game that affects them super emotionally. They'll review more for the stuff that affects them emotionally rather than the flaws. And then again, I don't think The Last of Us has that many flaws, but it's a good game to bring up for this.
I think that's okay though, because that's a show that I think as a reviewer you should, to be a decent reviewer, at least mention these things. But then if you're like, I didn't even notice because I was so invested in the story, like I didn't care that the controls were a little clunky or Ellie got stuck on this stupid truck 17 times.
Yeah.
Like I didn't care because I was like so invested in the story, you know?
Yeah, I think another good example along these lines is Journey, where Journey reviews extremely well, even though it's a very short game. It's just like so impactful that it definitely deserves a lot of the praise it gets.
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think again, even that answer comes down to context. Because if you take me specifically, I view games like they can be simple entertainment, right? But I think they're also the greatest form of storytelling that we have. And so that story and those emotional moments is going to be what is going to be what sticks with me the most. But that's just me specifically. Yeah. Other people will be like, I don't give a shit about the story. How many things can I shoot? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just all about like how you're coming, like your perspectives and how you're coming into that experience.
Yeah.
Because I think all four of us can agree that like games are art. Like I don't even think I'm shocked that that's still a debate that's being had today.
Yeah.
I still know plenty of people where I argue about that with them, and it's shocking to me. But
It is very strange.
Yeah. So I also
Well, it's
I
'cause-
think another important point here is games are extremely subjective.
Mhm.
Again, you can find positive and negative reviews for literally any game. Even like the
You can
worst
find-
trash and the best game ever. There will be
Yeah.
someone saying it's a 0 out of 10. There will be someone saying it's a 10 out of 10.
I am sure that there is someone out there who can convince me that I had an example in my head and then
That
I lost
Battletoads is
it.
the greatest game ever made.
No, it was about voice acting. What game was I playing that had really bad? There was a game I was playing that had really bad voice acting. It was some Japanese game. I forgot what it was. Final Fantasy 15. There we go. I hated that voice acting so much for a lot of the characters, but I'm sure that I will find someone who
That
will
is
give
a
legitimate
minority
defense.
opinion right there, Wyatt.
Not all of the voices. Not all of the voices. Oh wait, no, I'm talking about. My apologies. I'm talking about 7. I'm not talking about 15. I'm talking about 7. Excuse me.
7 remake or 7 itself?
Remake.
Really? Have you played the game?
I played the demo.
Yeah, not good enough. Okay.
No. I agree. No. That's fair. But if the section that I did play, I did not like the voice.
Yeah, I think the reason for that, the demo is the first mission of the game, and there are story reasons why a lot of the voices there are monotone. There's narrative reasons. So
Okay.
I would go back and watch a scene
But-
later
but-
in the game to
Okay,
get a
but
feel for the
let's
voice
take
acting.
that. But let's take that section on its own. Let's just forget I said. Let's just take that section on its own. Like, let's say people are just playing the demo. 7 hasn't come out yet, right?
Yeah, which
I'm
was a
sure I
scenario
would've
for a
found-
while.
Yeah. So let's say we're in that scenario. I'm sure I would have found someone who would have made a totally legitimate defense that voice acting was good, and they probably may have won me over. Like you're gonna find. What I'm saying is you're gonna find an extreme for both cases.
Yeah, I think JRPGs are definitely a good example of bad voice acting because there's plenty of JRPGs with bad voice acting. Recently, Trials of Mana released. There's a character that speaks in baby talk constantly, like a W in every single word. It is the worst thing I have ever listened to. It's
Oh my god.
I cannot listen to that, and I only play the demo again. But
Not good enough.
the thing I know,
sorry.
I know that never changes for that character,
Oh.
and that has actively made me not want to buy the game.
Oh my god.
That it's a weird scenario, but I am sure there are people that love that.
Ugh. I would not want to meet those people. I'm just kidding.
I mean, it's like you and me and the Nia and Xenoblade. I'm sure there are people who think that's the worst thing they've ever heard in their lives. Meanwhile, me and Ryan are like, "Oh my god, she said the Welsh thing again," and we're just like freaking throwing pillows across the room and having such a
Yeah,
good time.
that's a good example.
She said we're here again.
Yeah, voice acting is a whole other can of worms as well. But yeah, reviews are extremely subjective. I think a lot of the disconnect from reviewers that review games extremely highly and users that maybe don't feel as good comes down to a lot of people will look at games more as a product than as art. I think like another good example is Red Dead Redemption 2, reviewed extremely well, but a lot of people have issues with the controls, myself and I know Wyatt included, that are actively like a detritus to the game.
I have
No,
nightmares.
because see, that's the thing is I don't think that would be considering it as a product at all, because that to me the controls is 100% a part of the medium of.
I agree with
games.
that completely. The input
That-
and the interaction is part of the art.
The way you craft your controls in a video game is just as much an artistic way of quite not quite as artistic. I don't know. You could argue about that all the time, but I think that's an integral part of the game as art.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
no,
like-
it's like saying that brush strokes in a painting isn't
Right.
part of that. It totally is.
And I think Red Dead
It's-
Redemption 2 actually has a better example. The fact that you have so many animations that take a long time to do small activities like grabbing loot.
I would
Something
still
a
argue that
lot
is
of people
part
have problems with.
part of a game's is art thing.
Yeah,
but
no,
it
well,
is it's an
needlessly
artistic choice for the
complicated.
game that
It
a lot of
is.
people don't like.
It's an artistic choice for the game that I don't think makes it more artistic.
Well, unfortunately, art can get in the way of. So some people's artistic visions for a game can get in the way of gameplay, which often gets in the way of people's enjoyment for it.
Yeah, I
Let's
think
let
that's a
the
great way
artist
of
talk
putting it.
about this.
No, and an example because it's a different medium. Like it's the same way as if you were watching an anime and the screen was just too busy. It's like technically that was much more difficult to achieve, but I couldn't see what was happening. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the same thing as Red Dead. Like they just
It's a
they're-
technical
they're-
marvel, but
yeah, it's a
some of these
technical marvel, but
decisions were maybe not the best for the game.
they got
And
in the
if-
way of the whole piece of art.
And if
You
we're
know?
talking about it as a piece of art, I've brought this up to Ryan and I think Alex before. But if we're talking about it as a piece of art, my problem with it is consistency, because you have so many aspects that are this like really in-depth, insane, highly detailed like cowboy simulator where it takes 5 minutes to skin something. And then as soon as you go into your inventory and put on a different set of clothes, it's just like instantly goes on your character. If they wanted to remain consistent with that kind of like simulator, they would have Arthur get off his horse, take out his clothes. It's just it's inconsistent. And I think if we're
Yeah.
talking about it as art, which I think we should be, I think that's a huge issue.
So
You
I'm
either
wondering
have
if for
to
them that was like the line of they can't cross that because people will just stop playing the game because it's taking too long. 'Cause I know if
To
I
do
played the game
anything.
and that happened, I would probably stop playing.
I'd be like, no,
Yeah.
I don't have time for this shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've covered the point pretty well of like video games fall into art. Reviewers definitely review them as art a lot of the time. Sometimes they'll review them more as products. I know a lot of games like
Well,
I think it's
so
if people aren't interested in the game, they'll take a more product approach.
the only thing that I consider as thinking of a game as a product is the content you're paying for worth the money?
Well, yeah,
That's- I
that's,
think
like
that's
the
important.
definition of a product, though.
See,
Exactly. Well, exactly. But I think
that's the thing. That's what I wanted to bring up is there are so many people that are obsessed with this game. Like oh my god, it bothered me so much when Titanfall 2 first came out. Its biggest criticism was that the campaign was too short and that there wasn't enough content in the campaign.
okay. Yeah.
And it's like, but the length of that campaign was perfect for what it needed to be. You know, if
Yeah,
they
I think
if they
the
had-
concern then is that like my $60, if I can only buy one game that like in that like span of 3 months, will I buy that, or would I rather would my money be better spent for something that will provide me more entertainment for a longer time?
But then
then there was
what-
the multiplayer. I don't know. Like Titanfall
Well-
2 as a whole, I think was plenty worth the money. But that's
Yeah,
no,
definitely
I do
agree.
too.
based on
And then but the problem you run into then is that it's like, okay, they're asked to like they have this perfectly paced campaign, which is what I think it is anyways. It's like
Yeah.
really well paced, perfect length for what it needs to be. But then, you know, they get some EA higher up or whatever,
Yeah.
forcing them to add more levels. It just pads it out. And if we're looking at it as an artistic vision, it's now compromised because it's demanded because there's more content demanded from it. It's like
Yeah.
if you take a painting and then people are like, there's not enough going on in this painting, and you add extra, like maybe another person here or extra brush strokes and more color and everything.
Yeah.
It may be the same price and there's more going on, but
Well, I think
it's-
that it's more comparable to like charging $12 for a half an hour short film at a movie theater. People would be kind of upset about that, even if it's well paced. Like,
Yeah.
it's less of your time being entertained. So
Yeah,
it's,
and I
you
think
know,
Journey
worth a
Journey's
little bit less
definitely a good
money.
example for that of like it's a very short game, but the game was priced at a small price point. It was like $15. So
So that said, Titanfall 2 has a whole multiplayer, which
Yeah.
I think is worth the $60 on its own.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like,
And
So
I think in the
that's-
case of like something that's less replayable, like Titanfall 2, a lot of the
Yeah.
way shooters will get around that concern of like quality versus quantity is add some modifiers, like be able to play the campaign with
Yeah.
skulls and Halo, where the campaign's not that long, but you can replay missions on different difficulties.
Yeah,
You
replay
can
that
have
in.
crazy modifiers.
yeah, there's plenty of ways to increase the content value of your game. It's just a matter of
Yeah,
You know.
without like having a quality
yeah,
like deficit.
yeah.
yeah, in kind of wrapping it around, I just think because when you're looking at it of like price to like hour spent, I think that's when you're looking at it as a product and not as a piece of art.
Yeah.
You know, because it's about that you're paying for
It
that
should be-
overall
yeah.
experience and
It
not
should be priced to enjoyment, really. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, I think
it's
that's
like
definitely
it's
a better
priced to
comparison.
it's priced to what you got out of it, right? Like
Yeah.
I think I spent $15 on Journey, and that was an incredibly well spent $15 in my opinion. Like
Yeah,
that game, I
absolutely.
beat it in a day. I beat it in one sitting, and I would never ever take those $15 back.
It's also like I still think about Journey, right? It's one of
Yeah.
the few games that I still will actively be like, man, what a great experience.
Yeah, and you know, to perfectly go alongside that, I just beat Dragon Age Origins not too long ago, and while I do think a lot of the stories and characters and stuff in that game is great, there's so much time that I probably don't remember, and I could have just cut out that was just not interesting at all. You know, and
Yeah.
by the time I got around to the end, I felt burnt out. You know, I wasn't nearly as excited for this like incredibly thrilling, you know, conclusion, this like crescendo as it should have been, because I was burnt out because it just wasn't paced properly.
I mean, a lot of that is also probably that you were powering through the game in a relatively small time period. And I think when it released, people were definitely playing it for a much longer time.
I mean, sure, but like, say, you know, you compare that to Mass Effect. I never felt like there was a wasted second in like Mass Effect, in any of the Mass Effect games, and I completely no life that entire trilogy.
Yeah, I think for me, it's Mass Effect. To me, I can't play them all back to back to back. I tried, but after I finish one, it's a great experience, and I've really enjoyed my time. But I want to do something different for a little while. Like, I don't want to just go to the next one. I tried that with 2, and I burnt out on 2 very quickly. So now I'm like giving it another month to like sit, and I think I'm gonna go back and be a lot more excited to play the game when I've had time to like try some other stuff.
Sure.
So I think it's definitely like burnout plays a huge role in your enjoyment of the game, and like if you're burning out on a game's a hobby, right? Gaming is a hobby, and if you're feeling drained and burnt out by your hobby,
yeah,
do something different.
Take a goddamn break. It's supposed to
take
be
a
fun.
walk, like paint a picture or something.
It's one of the things. It's like video games are supposed to be fun. When you stop having fun, stop playing that video game. And
Yeah.
this is coming from a guy who's been big into esports games, and I have like 4,000 hours in Counter-Strike. So that was not something I did as a teenager, was stop playing when I wasn't having fun, because I never had fun playing Counter-Strike. you know? But like that's something I've learned. Just like stop. It's you're supposed to be having fun, man.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know if I like 100% agree with they're supposed to be fun, because I feel like there's definitely games that give you a lot more experience than having fun.
Well,
right?
I know, but like you're supposed to.
They should be engaging.
enjoying
I think
yourself.
engaging
You're
is usually.
Being engaged. You're not supposed to be fucking super angry at a video game, and it's like ruining your life. Like I don't know.
No, yeah, I think it's less about having fun and more like, was the time I put in worth it? Like at the end of the day, I feel like price for a game is more irrelevant when you think about, is the game worth my time? Because like I can look at a game like Destiny 2. There's so much content in Destiny 2, but there's no
Destiny 2
way.
does not respect your time at all.
Yeah,
that game is super
like,
disrespectful of your time.
Yeah, it's like for the amount, because like it's a free-to-play game, the amount of content there for a free-to-play game, oh yeah, you'll definitely get your time's worth. You'll get your money's worth.
Yeah, but you'll get your time's worth fucking not doing.
But your time is ultimately more valuable. So you have to think about, you know, what experience am I paying for?
At the same time, like I think people have an aversion to like if they're playing a game as a service like Destiny is, or an MMO, they feel bad if for some reason they play the game for like a couple weeks and then stop, and then maybe they'll come back in a month. Like, don't feel bad about that. That's like a great way to play those games.
No, it's definitely a way. Like people, and myself included, have certainly like, if I buy a game, I feel like I need to give it as much time as that money was worth to me. Like,
yeah,
you know. And then sometimes I'm like, oh man, I'm getting bored, but I'll just keep powering through because it's like I just spent $50 on this game. I got to get my money's worth.
Yeah,
but. At the end of the day, like it's like with the Total War games are actually a really perfect example of this for myself, and I think probably Ryan as well. It's like I'll boot that game up, play for an hour, and then put it down for 2-3 days, and then come back and play another hour of that campaign. And I have like 50 hours in Warhammer 2.
Yeah,
or like 50 or 60 hours in Warhammer 2. I love that game. It's just it gets boring after an hour, in my opinion. So I put it down and I come back to it. It's not
definitely
boring the next time I play. I have 92 hours in Warhammer 2, by the way.
Yeah. I think a good example for me is like a Mountain Blade is a game I love to death, but I'm taking like a solid month-long break because I want to come back to it and be like excited to play it again.
Yeah, I put 60 hours into that game from launch. Like from the day it launched to when I stopped playing, I played 59 hours. And then
it's absolutely worth it. But
yeah. I honestly, like, Last of Us 2 came at a perfect time because I finished Origins. I have the other two. Literally, I have them installed on my computer right now. But I'm taking a break because I got so burnt out from Origins. And I'm going to play Last of Us 2. And that's a perfect break then going back to...
Put a game down. Give it some time to rest. No need to do that. Again, coming from one of the most hypocritical people in that regard, because I...
Do as we say, not
Yeah, well, because I play... Well, I mean, I don't know. It's not that bad to, like, have a main game. Like, I play Tarkov all the time. But I switch it out sometimes when I'm getting burnt out of Tarkov. I'll go play Warhammer 2. I'll go play
I feel-
Satisfactory until I'm ready to go play some more Tarkov. And then eventually I'll like hate Tarkov and I won't want to play it for a year, and then I won't play it for a year. It's fine.
Yeah.
Whenever I get tired of a video game, I always go back to something in the Uncharted series as sort of a refresher for me.
Yeah, for me, it's usually like an RPG that I like. I'll go back to and play, maybe not finish a campaign, but like play a little bit of Persona, you know, just to get back in the groove. And it's always
Beautiful
fun.
Battlefield always gets me in the
And like
mood
now
to
that I
play
have Halo
anything
on
else.
PC, Halo's a great option for that. Okay, so we covered that pretty exhaustively.
Yeah.
right.
Well, that was kind of an important question. I like.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's like the most important question here, to be honest. So now, and we also kind of answered another question that I was going to ask later in it. So, how do you guys think? How objective do you think reviewers should be when they're reviewing games? This ties in a lot with what we were talking about, but for objective, I mean stuff like, should reviewers try to take games from an everyman stance, or should they fully just go in on their own personal opinions?
I think
really
there needs
don't
to be a
think
little
people
bit of
should be
both,
objective.
but I think personal opinion can be in the forefront. I don't understand. I don't see why.
Yeah.
Because objectivity, at the end of it, you can't be 100%.
Games are
objective
again
about it.
super subjective, so
It's
objectivity is hard.
impossible. Objectivity is
There-
impossible.
Yeah, I mean there are parts of a game that you can objectively critique, and then there, as with everything, every other art medium, there are things you can't objectively critique.
Yeah, I think a good example for this is like Fallout 76. That game
Yeah.
is objectively like a rushed video game when it came out. It was
Yeah.
rushed and barely functional.
I think Bethesda's even admitted that it was rushed.
Yeah, they
Like,
did when they
Yeah.
announced Wastelanders.
I think in a perfect world, how sort of my view on the review process would go is, companies and outlet sources that do reviews for games, they're going to have one or maybe multiple people dedicated to a genre or maybe a really expansive series of games. One to multiple people per genre, let's say, and you have everyone from all the different genres go after a game, fully lean into their objectivity because they're going to have a body of work that you can reference beforehand to see their biases, but you also want it to be stated that this is completely objective, but you get so many well-informed points of view on a video game from completely different genres perspectives that it creates a well-rounded approach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a reviewer being completely, getting my terminology mixed up. I think a critic being completely subjective is 100% fine as long as they're very clear about their biases towards something.
Yeah.
I mean if you're like,
Right.
my opinion is that's fine.
Yeah, it's
When
like
you're saying it's an opinion.
yeah, it's
whatever,
like
so
when
you're allowed to do that.
I was I'm gonna bring up Last of Us 2 for like a split second. We're not gonna get into it. It's fine, just split second. But when I saw, because I'm a huge fan of SkillUp, he's like one of my favorite reviewers working right now. He's incredible. When I saw his thumbnail, which is like, I did not enjoy this at all, I was like, yeah, that's about what I expected, because he's made it very clear many times that he's not a huge fan. So I wasn't expecting him to really be like, throwing heaps of praise at the game, right?
Because how his experience is going to be from his past body of work, which is good.
Yeah.
Inform yourself about that stuff.
Yep.
So I think he makes it very clear that gameplay tends to be his primary focus in his reviews, and like I don't think people would disagree that The Last of Us, their gameplay is not breaking any boundaries. Like it's not the thing you play their games for.
No, I can agree with that.
Yeah, I think literally anyone who's played The Last of Us, like when I think of The Last of Us, I don't remember waiting around corners and like listening for things. I remember the story. Like that is what comes to mind.
There are some gameplay parts, that stick out to me, but I think that's because I think the game allows for enough player expression when it comes to combat encounters, where you kind of hold on to those memories because you weren't
Yeah.
forced to do something.
I think it's also like it depends on your experiences. So Wyatt and I've talked about this, and like I'm someone that grew up with Metal Gear games and a lot of stealth games. Like that was kind of my jam. So my like standards for stealth gameplay are a lot higher than I think the normal audience for Last of Us is. So I like when I go in expecting stuff like being able to pull off these complicated stealth timing maneuvers and everything, The Last of Us isn't really aiming to do that. Like it was never really the game's intention to cater to that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just
it's
inevitably going to be compared to those games because it's the same style of gameplay.
And I'm someone that enjoys that style of stealth because it's perfectly designed to have one type of encounter, which is the type of encounter that I love the most, which is sneak around a little bit and then you fuck up and then all hell breaks loose. I love those scenarios to death, and it's perfectly designed for encounters to end up that way, and that's why I'm personally fine with it.
Yeah.
You know?
And I definitely think like there's valid criticisms there. Stuff like I think Metal Gear Solid 5 is another great example of like that game had amazing gameplay, but the story had some major issues. Like everyone agreed that the story that was there was pretty interesting, but where was the other half of it? So
and
I
it's
think,
not newcomer friendly at all.
yeah,
At all.
but the gameplay itself, like you can kind of ignore the story in that game and just play for the gameplay because the gameplay is fantastic.
Right.
Which I think is one of
which
the
I feel
reasons-
like says something about the story.
Yeah. Which the story, like, I remember the story of Metal Gear 5, but not nearly as much as any of the other games.
Mhm.
So I think that is definitely something that plays into it. Like, people have their own experiences and their games that they prefer. Like, I'm not going to go to someone that typically reveals FPS games for a review of a racing game.
Yep.
Right? Because that's not their wheelhouse.
You're not going
like
to
it.
get a good recommendation of a racing game from me.
But like maybe if I love FPS games and I love racing games, maybe I'll watch reviews by someone that also loves both of those genres, so I have a good background. Maybe there's an FPS racing game coming around, you know?
And to bring up an earlier point, it is important to get those opinions from like, okay, this person plays first person shooters but not racing games, but then all of a sudden this person makes a review of a racing game that, you know, they really, really love. And that is just as valid, you know, that sticks out. And I think that's important.
Yeah. So I think we've covered objectivity pretty much. Objectivity is like impossible in games anyway. You can't be
to a
objective
degree.
about game
Obviously,
reviews.
you can be objective and like, oh man, the game didn't work, or like, oh man, this certain mechanic is objectively bad. Like it because there can be things like that.
Absolutely, like
It's
bugs.
just-
Bugs are a great example of things that
Bugs are objective. I know, but
Well,
like you could
see-
also be like you as a game designer. You will talk about these things in games, and I agree with you most of the time. And that there can be objectivity in game mechanics and in level design can be objectively
Yeah.
bad.
And bugs
like
is
a hindrance to the player. So
bugs is an interesting thing to bring up because I would mostly agree that like bugs is objective. It's like this game does or does not have a lot of bugs. But then in the back of my mind, I think, okay, it's pretty agreed that like you know most people love Fallen Order, but that game is buggy as hell, right?
absolutely, yeah, but it's a great game.
But that was a complete shock to me because when I played it on PC, and I didn't have a PC at the time, so I played it on a Surface Book 2 to be 100% transparent. It ran fine, and I didn't experience nearly the amount of crazy bugs that I've seen online. Like, I would say 95% of the time it was running perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And other people have had catastrophic errors that I've never, ever seen before.
Yeah, and I did experience a lot of those bugs, but I still had a great time with the game because like it
Also-
wasn't frequent.
Honestly,
it had
I
issues
would
occasionally.
consider considering bugs in your review of a game to be a part of rating it as a product, actually, because
If the
that's
product
not
doesn't
part of
work,
that's not part of the game designer's artistic vision. Like he doesn't
Well,
like,
right, but-
I'm choosing to put this bug in here.
Well, sure, but bugs can also
They take
Um,
away from your experience for sure, which is why
they
it's
can-
important to mention them. But I don't
Yeah.
think
well they can take away from like the artistic vision of something. Like imagine you're watching
absolutely.
imagine you're watching a cutscene in Last of Us. You love these characters, are really engaged, and they're just sliding around the scene T-posing the entire time. It's going to completely ruin any
Yeah.
drama in that
It
scene.
definitely damages the
that
artistic
that
vision.
happened
but
to
it's
me
not
when I was
like-
in the playthrough I'm doing of Last of Us 2. One of the characters in the background T-posed and it was hilarious.
Oh,
I know. but
Dragon
what I'm
Age-
saying is,
Dragon Age Origins has been a complete shit show.
that
Yeah.
is not a problem with the artistic vision, but a problem with the product of
Yeah,
the game.
it's a problem with the programming generally.
Yeah,
And the worst, not only artistic but also product, ruining.
Well, I think it's both.
I think.
me.
Well, I mean, it's both because
No,
It
affects
affects
both.
the artistic vision, but it's not related to the artistic vision.
Well, I mean, it's related. It's just
Well,
it
it
just
is.
isn't
It
the
is.
artistic vision.
Well,
Like,
it's not like born from the artistic vision, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody is going to
It's
their
like-
game unless you're the Goat Simulator devs. You're not going to your game and going, "I want 1,500 bucks."
Well, no, just like as a comparison to real art, it's like
Unless you're playing Saints Row 3. In that case, it's very intentional. If anyone knows what I'm talking about.
no, but consider watching a scratched CD. You miss like a solid portion of the movie. Like it wasn't. That definitely took away from your enjoyment of the art.
Mhm.
But it's not.
To that I say though, that
Of course,
scratch.
that wasn't done by the manufacturer. I know, but like
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. is
Yeah.
that-
Yeah, but in the
I
case
get
of
to
like
be-
Skyrim is a buggy game, extremely
it's a
buggy,
mess.
and
Mess.
I don't think anyone's gonna say that's positive in any situation.
I don't know.
You can have fun.
Bethesda games have their charm. Man.
You can have
I
funny
don't know.
bugs.
You can have fun,
You
but
can have-
a lot of the Skyrim's original bugs broke the game. Like flat
yes.
out would break the game. It was not playable.
The ones that are left
Anthem
in the
bugs-
game are fine.
Anthem bugs are not fun.
Yeah, Anthem,
bugs.
Fallout 76, like
Ubisoft bugs are a lot of fun.
The point is that I think bugs are more a flaw with the game as a product than they are with a flaw with the. They're a flaw with the game as a product affecting the art, but
I
it's
think
not
it's-
like part of
I
it.
think it's equal.
yeah, I think like
I don't know.
it's from the perspective of the developers. The developers, the bug is not in their creative vision at all. Therefore, it's a problem with the product because it's born out of
Yeah, they're just failing to deliver
the delivery. Yeah, it's the execution.
their artistic vision.
And it's
So
when
to me,
you sell something for money, you tend to there's kind of like an unwritten contract there with your consumer that is like,
it's gonna
hey,
work.
I've made a product
then-
for you. It's going to
Yeah.
work.
And what you're receiving as a consumer is what you intended for me to receive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like with
Well,
Kickstarter. If the
this is the
Kickstarter
thing.
doesn't fall through, the company has failed you as a consumer. So I think it fits more with that. Bugs will absolutely affect the artistic vision, but they are not ever something related to the artistic vision unless you are the Goat Simulator devs who really want bugs. Like,
Well, I think then it's no longer a part of the like that is the product now. Is it wants to
Exactly,
be
exactly.
broken, so
so
yeah.
so yeah, we've covered this pretty extensively. So we're moving on to a lighter topic a little bit. Do you like video reviews or written reviews?
I prefer video reviews personally because it has that added element of being able to directly show you the gameplay rather than describing it, and because games is such a it's such an experience-based medium because it's both visual and auditory at the same time
Yeah.
that it really helps to be able to see what they're talking about.
I
It's
think-
like it's the difference between an essay that has cited sources and an essay that doesn't.
I think it's a no-brainer. You can if I watch a movie review, if I watch an anime review, if I watch a video game review, I expect to see some of what that is. You have to cite this thing that you're talking about, otherwise, it's difficult. If you write a book review, obviously, you don't need to have audio visual because the medium itself is not audio visual. But if you're writing a review for an audio visual medium, I feel like there needs to be some audio visual element.
I think generally I agree with that. My one so this ties into my next question, which is going to be: do you think reviews have the capability to spoil games?
Oh.
Which I think we can say you definitely can spoil a game in a review. It's up to the reviewer to
Just
be
spoil it.
careful to not do that, and the embargo to cover.
Or to be clear that it's going to be a spoiler.
Yeah, be
filled.
clear about it.
Yeah.
Make sure people know. I think so with written reviews. One reason I like written reviews for certain games is like if I don't want to see any of the environments in a
Yeah.
game, like say I know I'm going to buy the next Dark Souls
yeah,
game.
that's
Like
good.
if I'm gonna buy the next Dark Souls game, no matter what, I'll read a written review and not a video review because I want to experience the product itself.
Then just listen
my
to the video and not watch it. Listen to it as like a podcast or
But like I
use it
could, someone might say, look at the screen, and I could be like, what? So
No, but I know, but like that's your personal choice. But in my opinion, like it's just a written review for an audiovisual medium is just not going to be able to as thoroughly review the content.
It doesn't
I-
translate.
I
Fancy.
prefer video reviews as more of a necessity because I have a reading disability, but also it is
Yeah.
more illustrative of
Well, like I'm just like saying, if you were now thinking about reviewing the review, like yes, an audio. So if the next Dark Souls game has incredible environments, you as a Dark Souls player know what that means. But somebody who's never played the game is going to need a
Yeah.
video to be like, so now back up that this game actually has incredible environments by showing me some of the incredible environments.
I think a lot of it also goes with like trust in the reviewer. So I prefer video reviews generally. The audio thing is like Dark Souls is one of the specific examples where if a new Dark Souls game is coming out, I'm not gonna watch a review.
You don't need a review to buy that.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of a new Dark Souls game, can I talk about Demon Souls at all in this, or are we avoiding?
I mean, like we don't know anything about Demon Souls. We know basically nothing.
What you're talking about with the environments, with the art style in general for Demon Souls,
Yeah, I think the
The
thing with Demon Souls
remake has changed
is
it.
I don't expect, like I've already played Demon Souls, so I'm curious to see what the new version is, but it's not like I have absolute faith in the game because it's being developed by a different developer. It's Bluepoint is handling the Demon Souls remaster, not FromSoft. So there's this question now of, is this going to be the Demon Souls that I remember, or I hope it isn't, to be honest. I hope they fix some things. So I'll definitely be watching a review of that because I want to know if they've changed anything, especially the things that I think really need to be changed about old Demon Souls, and like updated them to a more modern standard. So I think that's like a unique case in that people already know what the game looks like generally,
Yeah.
and we're now
And-
looking to this new interpretation of it.
But if you weren't to see the reveal trailer for the PS5, you would think, oh, I don't know, maybe they're just gonna make the textures more high resolution. No, they changed the art style for the game.
Well, actually, so the art style is interesting with Demon Souls in that a lot of the changes there are not because the art style was changed. It's more that the original hardware was not capable of, or the original game wasn't capable of delivering the art style they wanted. So, from my understanding, the remake is actually more in line with what the original vision was. It's just like the lighting engine on the PS3 was an early PS3 game. Like, it just couldn't, they didn't know how to handle it. So, it didn't look the way they wanted it to.
So,
Demon Souls is not meant to be as dark as the other Dark Souls games.
So back to, because we talked briefly about spoilers in reviews, because this was a subject that was brought up during when Final Fantasy VII came out. Now it's been described to me that spoilers in 7 is a completely different case, and it's been explained to me.
The example with 7, I think I'll throw out to everyone, is that 7 is often treated, the spoiler in that game is treated the same way as the Darth Vader spoiler for Star Wars. So it's like a key moment, but at this point, most people accept that people know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're not going to spoil it either of those here in case.
I don't know it. So
yeah, but again, you're not someone that traditionally plays JRPGs.
No, not at all.
So I think most people that have played JRPGs definitely know about it because it's kind of unavoidable. There's a lot of comparisons to that scene in reviews and stuff. Like people will talk about it and be like, "This game has something reminiscent of this scene." And like that emotional impact. So I think it's another unique case.
What I was saying was it came out around Final Fantasy VII, which I don't think is the best like example because it does kind of change things the way it's been described to me. But I think in general, if you have a remake or a remaster of a game, I think it is important to not spoil it because a lot of people are like, well, this game's been out for so and so years. And my thing is like part of the reason this remake or remaster exists to begin with is to bring in a new audience. And if you're just going to spoil the game for those new, possibly interested people because it's been out for so long, that's kind of, I feel like it's kind of defeating the point, part of the point of a remake to begin with. You know?
I think my opinion is like, it's like with movies where if a movie's been out for 20 years and it's like commonly accepted into film, like important movies that people should see and people talk about moments, at that point, if you've been alive that entire time, odds are you're not going to watch the movie without knowing the spoiler. Like maybe that spoiler will get you to watch it. So like with me, I probably wouldn't have played Final Fantasy VII if I didn't know about the spoiler. But the spoiler got me super interested, so I played it.
That doesn't make any sense to me at all because
I think it's
I
to
get
me
that.
because
I'm
it's a
very
game I would
adverse
not have
to
been interested in.
spoilers. Like I'm
This
very
is an
like
argument. I think
anti-spoiler, but that's just me.
that's fair, but I don't know. I have an interesting opinion on spoilers.
If the plot is
And that's
good
because
enough,
personally they
one
don't
spoiler is just
tend
one
to
aspect of
affect
the
me.
story, and there's plenty more to experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because like I think with the same thing with the Star Wars spoiler, same thing with Final Fantasy VII. It's the getting there that's the interesting part, and not the event itself. Like the event itself isn't 100% what is important. At the same time, like it absolutely will lessen your enjoyment if you know about it beforehand. Because like the reactions of people that see the Star Wars reveal for the first time are incredible.
Yeah,
Like-
and yeah, and you know another good example, like, kind of a weird example, but imagine if everyone going into that Nintendo Direct knew that they were going to announce Smash Ultimate, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like we wouldn't like no one would be nearly as excited as they were because we had no idea. They even directly misled us by saying, "Oh yeah, you know, we're not really working on anything right now. The creative lead behind that's kind of taking a break."
Yep.
They went out of their way to make that a surprise for us, and it was all the better because of that. If we'd went in knowing that it was going to be a reveal for Smash, it wouldn't have stuck out in people's minds as much. You know?
Absolutely. I think it's a good point of like spoilers tie in. I think it can definitely spoil, like leaks can spoil events. In that sometimes the sheer hype of seeing something on screen for the first time is incredible.
Yeah.
Like there are E3 conferences that are absolutely phenomenal. A lot of Sony's old conferences are incredible because they'll reveal something that somehow they managed to keep secret for years. Like Final Fantasy VII Remake was that situation of nobody knew about it. No one knows how nobody knew about it, but it was super cool to see it announced for the first time, or for a remake.
One more recent E3 reveal that comes to my mind, that Halo Infinite reveal was
Absolutely.
perfect.
Yeah.
That was so good. And it was so subtle too. You know, it's
Actually,
like these landscapes and
I think
everything,
the
and then it's just the
penultimate-
helmet. And it was beautiful.
The penultimate E3 reveal, Keanu in Cyberpunk.
Yep.
If people had known about that, it would have not had any impact. But because people didn't have any clue that was going to happen, you see that moment, you see him walk on stage and you're like, wait a minute, my brain isn't computing this right now. Like it's a crazy
Honestly,
moment.
Honestly, the Halo Infinite got me more than that. I mean, look, I love Keanu, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah,
that,
I think
that
for me
Halo
it's
Infinite
because
reveal
I was
just-
expecting a new Halo reveal because Microsoft is leaning to a new console. So, of course, there's probably going to be a Halo game to go with it.
But it didn't look like a Halo game. Or at least
yeah.
it does in hindsight,
It
but it
tricked
didn't
me.
at the time.
The first 30 seconds of the reveal are very much not that Halo-y, but it becomes Halo-y a little into it. But for
feel like
Keanu,
there-
nobody expected that.
Yeah,
no
yeah.
one had any clue that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that we've covered the that also kind of covered our hype question. So I had a question that was, do you think
Yeah.
hype plays into reviews and like your opinions of games and whatnot?
Yes,
I think
yes,
everyone's going to
yes,
say yes.
yes,
Hype is
yes, yes,
absolutely
yes.
part of like game culture.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think the only time it can be detrimental is if a ton of reviewers get hyped about a game and let that factor into what they score it. I think that kind of happened with Metal Gear 5, where a bunch of people were super hyped that we were getting another Metal Gear and maybe scored it higher or lower than it deserved. Because of like
No Man's Sky.
it didn't look. No Man's Sky is a great example of like people were so hyped for it that it disappointed them to an incredible degree.
Well, I mean, in fairness, the game was very disappointing when it came out.
Yeah, but
Like,
imagine if No
by
Man's
anyone's
Sky was like
standards, that was
a
not-
$30 early access game. I think people would have
Yeah.
been a lot happier with it.
Because I mean, it
Yeah, but
it
it
had
wasn't $30.
Exactly, but that's because of Sony's like market influx. That wasn't
Yeah,
really the
if it didn't have
vision
a
of the
spot,
studio.
if it didn't have a spot at the VGAs, if it didn't, if
Absolutely.
it wasn't backed by Sony, if it didn't go on all those late night shows and stuff, no one.
Well, if
no
they
one
didn't, yeah,
would've
if they
cared.
didn't promise us more than they gave us, people wouldn't have been upset.
But that's still part of the argument, though. I would
Right.
say.
I
Yeah,
would
it's
agree.
also
No,
like I think developers can obviously get hyped up in their own stuff. Like I think that happened with
Yeah.
Fallout 76. That happened with No Man's Sky, where the developers
Watch Dogs.
get super.
another
Yeah,
good
Watch Dogs,
example.
great example. Developers get super hyped about their product, and they're like, people are gonna love this. People are they're gonna love it so much. We're gonna put so much effort into this, and maybe it's just like there's a disconnect with what people want. And
Well, they know
what they're
that they
producing.
can profit off of that hype as well.
yeah, and it's
So
like
they
with
wanna
Fallout
keep it going.
76. I think there's a central misunderstanding that people don't really have a desire for a multiplayer only Fallout. They want multiplayer Fallout, but they also want the single player stuff that they're so used to, like the
They
storylines
aren't
that they're used
connected
to.
to their audience the way that they should
Yeah,
have
there's a
been.
disconnect.
Yeah.
I think that basically covers
It's
the
either
high
that or
question.
they deliberately misled and tricked their audience, and I'd much rather believe that they just weren't paying attention to their fans.
Yeah, or maybe so. The case I know for 76 is that it was a less experienced division of Bethesda Softworks
Mhm.
that was or Bethesda Game Studios, I think, that was doing it, and they just got more and more expectations layered onto them as it was going that they just kind of couldn't meet. Like this world's gonna be 4 times bigger than Fallout 4. It's gonna have 16 times the detail.
16 times.
It's like
So that was sort of a No Man's Sky situation there, then.
yeah, absolutely.
Well-
Where No Man's Skies was made by an inexperienced team.
Yeah.
Under
And-
originally a small budget, and Sony came in with a huge publishing budget for them.
The other problem is that they were basically just given Fallout 4 and they were told to put it in an online infrastructure, which just is not what you should do at all.
Yeah.
They were really screwed from the outset with that one.
Because I think any game developer knows network stuff for networking your game is one of the hardest things to get right, and trying to network an existing code base is even harder because you're like retroactively modifying an entire game engine to do networking. Where like if they were using Unreal, that wouldn't really have been a problem, or Unity, because those have solutions for networking. They're using their own engine, so they have to make their own solution and then readapt everything they've already done to fit that solution.
Yeah, they're also using the Creation Engine, which is like the equivalent of a Jenga tower after like a 3-hour game.
Yeah, we're not going to get into the Creation Engine.
It barely works.
Anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah. So last question, should reviews be categorized? So what I mean by this is there are some reviewers I know that will do reviews and score games, if they do scores, based on individual categories. So they'll talk about, like, ACG is a great example of this, where he kind of talks about every category and sort of gives his opinion on each individual section of the game. Stuff like the story. Is the story great? Is the gameplay great? Is the audio good? Are the visuals good? So, like, visiting different sections of the game and kind of reviewing them separately before bringing it in as a whole. Do you think that's a good approach?
Absolutely.
I think any good review does that. It should do that no matter what, even if it's not
But-
like explicitly laid out.
I agree
You know.
with one big asterisk next to it, because we've been bringing up we've been bringing up Last of Us a lot, and I think it kind of fits into this category. But I feel like you can have all these different categories and split it up, but I think you also have to have an entire section talking about how these categories coalesce together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you can have a game that's less or more than the sum of its individual parts, right?
Yep.
And so it's very important that you take those different categories and you have to talk about how do they all work together. Because again, like Last of Us, you can have like serviceable gameplay and a really, really great story, but it's about how those two things combine together, right?
Yeah, it's like they use their serviceable gameplay extremely well.
Yeah.
So the story
Well, no,
is is better for it.
I wasn't denying that. I was saying I think any good review is going to mention, different parts of a game separately and then bring those
Yeah.
together. And it's
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
thing you would do in like any kind of argumentative essay. Like, that's just basic writing. I don't know.
I don't know. I think a lot of reviews don't necessarily do this.
I think they should. I'm saying a good
Absolutely, I
one
think they should.
I think that's good writing.
Yeah. I think ACG does a good job of that in terms of like how
yeah,
all
I
these
think he was the
individual
first
parts-
example just because he has specific categories that he individually goes through, but you don't have to
He
have
has-
specific categories to
Man,
follow.
he has game reviews down to an absolute like science. It's insane. He has a structure, and boy oh boy does he stick to it. And that's not even a bad thing. It's just he's very workmanlike, and I really
Yeah.
respect that a lot.
So yeah, I think for me definitely the categories thing plays into it. I think a lot of there are some examples of games that a lot of companies have reviewed in the past that I don't necessarily agree with because of one issue that is like really impactful to me. And I know a good example is Breath of the Wild. So Breath of the Wild reviewed extremely well. The one major issue I have with that game is the durability system. It is so frustrating to deal with after a certain point, especially when they release like the Master Mode DLC, where you cannot kill a single enemy with one thing. You go through like 4 different weapons per fight. And that's
What?
the kind it's Breath of the Wild is a
It-
fantastic game,
it-
but that is like the one thing that I really wish they don't do in the sequel.
It makes all of the gear that you do get a lot less exciting because it's just you're either
Yeah.
gonna have to save it until much later, or it's just gonna last 2 seconds.
Absolutely.
Well,
I think like it's not even that durability is a bad system in and of itself. It's just in that specific game, it didn't fit as well as I think.
It
And, like, they
wasn't
could have
tuned
fixed it
correct.
if they just like doubled the durability on everything. They would have fixed the problem.
The Master Sword is the one thing that doesn't break. You even get the Helion shield, the second most iconic thing in that entire series, and that breaks.
Yeah, and the Master Sword
Yeah.
breaks too. It doesn't fully break, but it will
Well,
have to take a 30-minute recharge.
Yeah.
Recharges, yeah.
And it's just like it's so frustrating.
So there's one more thing I wanted to talk about,
Yep.
and it's related to what's going on right now. What are y'all's thoughts on review bombing?
What's that?
It's where
It's-
a bunch of users will go in and bombard either negative or positive reviews. Negative is more common. Like look at The Last of Us 2 right now. It's kind of happening. It happened with No Man's Sky.
It happened with Doom Eternal when they added Denuvo.
Yeah, that's a good example.
It's a form of trolling. It's not good. If it's a form of protest, then I absolutely agree with it.
Yeah, see, that's the thing is that in Last of Us 2's case, the game has been out for not enough time for all of those people to have played it, and it's like people either read the spoilers and then did that review, and they just review bombed it or something like
Yeah.
that.
I
Whereas
still don't
something-
understand why people are so upset. Of course, I don't even know what the spoiler is. But
Yeah, I think with Last of Us 2, it's very much a case of you need to know what happens and you need to not only know, but you need to see the journey to get there.
Yeah.
To
And it's
form your own opinion about it.
And it's why I was saying too, people who are getting pissed off about the spoilers, I'm like, look, you can read the plot points, but seeing it in motion is a completely different thing.
Yeah, it's very different. We're not going to talk about Last of Us 2 specifics because we are planning a whole podcast on that. So
Right.
we're not going to get
I-
into like the specifics of that, but it's definitely a situation of people
I'm going
should
to, at the
play
very
the game.
least, get the story in the next 2 days because Tess is coming over and she's told me she won't talk to me until we finish The Last of Us 2.
Yeah. So I think with games, it's super important before you review something to form your own opinion. For story-heavy games, watching a playthrough is kind of adequate for that. Like, if you know you don't like the gameplay of The Last of Us and you're watching a playthrough, I don't think anyone's going to have a problem with that. Same thing with like Life is Strange. If you know you don't want to just make choices, but
See, I do have a slight problem in
An
terms
issue with
of
that
like,
is that you're not supporting
well,
a product.
well,
that you
okay. So my
clearly
example is
enjoy.
I bought The Last of Us and played it.
Yeah.
Until the gameplay was just like not clicking with me and it was actively detracting from my experience.
Right.
So I went and watched a playthrough because to me, like, the gameplay is not what I enjoyed about that game. And I don't
That's
want to
fine.
spend time struggling with the gameplay, and not even struggling. It's just like doing gameplay that is not fun for me when
So-
I could get to the fun parts.
So my issue with that is that, like I said before, to me, video games is the best form of storytelling, and to me, watching a playthrough of a game and then having that be comparable to actually playing it completely defeats what makes games as storytelling tools so special.
Yeah, I
Because-
think it very much depends on the game as well.
Because
some games take
I
full
would
advantage
not-
of being games, some don't.
Yeah, because for me, it's like a lot of people complained about the segments in Last of Us 1 where you're like boosting Ellie up or grabbing the ladder. You have to get like the pallet for her to like float on it and stuff like that. To me, and I feel like for a lot of people, it
Yeah, for me as well.
what that
definitely agree
did
with
is that
this.
it strengthened their bond even more, and it's showing you they can't do this adventure without each other.
Yeah.
It's the same as if I had watched someone play a playthrough of all 3 Mass Effect games. But no, I was the one making those decisions. I was there. I was having those interactions. And so I
Yeah.
care about those characters so much more because I was there and I played a hand in that.
And I think there's definitely a difference too between like The Last of Us and Mass Effect. Mass Effect is a very choice-heavy game. The Last of Us really isn't.
But it's still
telling
there.
one story.
That interactive storytelling is still there. It's a different kind
Yeah,
of.
but I
it's
don't. I
more
think
physical
if
interaction,
you
but
if
it's
you
still
don't
there.
play Mass Effect and you don't make your own choices, you're losing out a lot more than if you watch a playthrough like The Last of Us, because you're getting
agree
the
with
same
that.
story. You're
would
still
agree.
losing something. It's just not nearly as bad. Like I think you're if you watch a playthrough of Mass Effect, you're kind of missing the point of the game where the point isn't the story they're telling, the point is the journey to the end of that story and the choices you make along the way and your own
It's your-
personalized version.
because it's your
Um,
story. It's how you want things to play out, or
Yeah.
or like it's your best attempt to get things to end up in a certain way, and the excitement becomes when the game pushes back. You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with like things that maybe if you don't enjoy the gameplay of the game, but you're super interested. So there's RPGs that I love for the story, and the gameplay just doesn't take with me. So I hate, my personal hatred in RPGs is real time with pause combat systems. I despise them. Dragon Age Origins has one, and it's just like my least favorite part of the game.
and
because-
Inquisition has one. Well, all three of them do, don't they? Wait,
Not
no,
quite,
two
not
doesn't.
quite. So they get better as they go on. Like I like well executed ones, but there are a lot of games like Pillars of Eternity and what's the other RPG? There's another popular RPG, Baldur's Gate that emulate D&D stuff, but with real time. And to me, it's like they're taking a system that was designed for a turn-based game and applying it to real time, and it becomes so much harder to play.
Mm.
And it's just like so hectic that it takes away enjoyment. So in those scenarios, I'm just like, I love the story of this game, but the gameplay is not worth it to me. Which like I think is a good example for Pillars of Eternity. They're adding, or they've already added in a turn-based mode for people to go back and play it, because they're recognizing that like there are people that just don't like real-time turn, and there's vice versa too. Like there are people that hate turn-based, which is absolutely valid. Like games are super subjective. So
Yep.
catering to as many people as possible with those systems, like nobody's gonna knock Last of Us 2 for its accessibility options because
Sure.
they're incredible.
Sure.
So like
Some
giving
people.
people their options of how to play things or watch things the way they want is super important.
Sure.
But like do the bare minimum before leaving a review on something. Because if you're review bombing something based on a spoiler that you heard or something you've watched, you're not really helping anything, because you don't have the background to make constructive criticism. You're just telling things they're bad. And I also think like for review bombing, it's important to recognize that you should change that review in the future if that changes.
Also, if you're the kind of person that will make 5+ accounts to make the same review on one game, screw you. Like it's such a I'm
There's better
sorry.
uses
like,
of your time. There's better uses of
screw
your
you.
time.
And it's also just it's
Yeah,
so
that's an
disingenuous. It's
entirely
so
separate
pissy.
can of worms of
Whoever does that, screw you. Honestly,
yeah. And I think
can't-
like legitimately, if
I
The
have-
Last of Us 2 user reviews were more reflective of actual opinions, I think it would be closer to like a 7 or an 8, or maybe even a 9 than
people who do that are scum. I'm sorry.
like 0. She's just escalating it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's like I think they're legit criticism for Last of Us 2, but like for me, I was not spoiled to the game. I can say if I had been spoiled to a major event that happens, I would have a lesser opinion of the game until I played it, and I think that event is like my least disliked part of the game. Like that's something I actually think they handled pretty well. There's like stuff, there's issues with it, but they handled stuff pretty well. So I think spoilers out of context are absolutely bad. Like
Yeah.
It's not worth it because you don't have the context. You don't know what it means. Like maybe there's people that are like, I'm gonna hate an arms fighter in Smash, right? But maybe that arms fighter is gonna be super fun. Like I think there's
never
reaction with
know.
Piranha Plant.
No,
Piranha
maybe
Plant,
Smash needs some spring fists, man. Get him in there.
they
man.
teased Piranha Plant, or they showed off Piranha Plant for Smash, and people were super angry. And it's like
That's
the
because it
character's
was
really fun.
Luigi. Or Waluigi, excuse me.
Yeah, Waluigi deserves justice.
Oh my
Yeah. Okay, we've pretty much run the gamut of review conversation at this point. We're running a bit over time. So I think we're going to move on to our last segment here, which is shout-outs. Just shout out something. You know? Just a nice... It can be good, it can be bad. But shout it out.
I had a shout out as early as this morning because I thought it was really funny. I saw the Cyberpunk 2077. It was on Steam, and it already has a masterpiece tag on it before the game's even out, and I thought that was hilarious.
Sorry,
I
how
had
does that
to-
even work?
I think that's the funniest thing I've ever seen. I don't know if it's changed at all, but the last time I saw it had a masterpiece tag, and
What does that mean?
it's like like Steam games are
Steam
categorized by
users
tags.
can tag games.
So like it'll be
Oh,
like,
yeah,
FPS
yeah.
tag. There's a masterpiece tag, and it's
Masterpiece.
already been put. It's already been put on Cyberpunk, and that's the funniest
I'm
thing.
looking at it.
Yeah, so
Only tagged with single player at the moment.
yeah, they took it away. My,
No, I see it. How popular user defined. All right, whatever.
all right, we've got shoutouts to do. We got shoutouts to do because we got to end the show. We have time limits. We gotta. All right, Ben, what's your shout out?
Shout out to those ribs I made today. God damn, 6 hours in the smoker, and let me tell you, every goddamn second was worth it because those were delicious.
Did you burn your hand though?
I burnt my feet on the driveway.
Did you burn your feet on your George Foreman grill? All right, moving on, Alex.
Oh, Office reference, really?
I approve. I approve.
Yeah, it's Father's Day. Shout out to my dad.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice. I
that's a good
forgot
one.
about that. I
We're
cooked
gonna do
them for
group
my
shout
dad.
out to dads. You know,
Yeah.
group
Happy
shout
Dad
out
Day.
to any dad.
Happy Dad Day.
It's Dad Day.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Dad Day.
I thought that
And
was
you
going
can
to go
tell
somewhere. Thank
your dad that
God.
this is Daddy's favorite
Were you leaning
podcast.
towards Happy Daddy Day, Wyatt?
No. Oh.
All right, we got one last shout out, and I'm
Dandy
gonna
Dad
shout
Day.
this out just because I know it's gonna anger Wyatt. I'm gonna shout out the voice acting in Final Fantasy VII. It's some of the best voice acting. Unironically, it is some of the best voice acting in any recent video game.
And on that note, have a dandy Dad Day.
Have a dandy dad day. Keep
the hell
your
out of my
dad in
face.
mind while you listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
It'll really
I mean,
help
it's a
you
bit
out.
late because it's over.